Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. Liverpool beat Crystal Palace by 1-0 today in what wasn't necessarily the best performance, but given how many changes Jurgen Klopp had to make during this game to ensure that Liverpool were ready for the game against Hoffenheim in midweek, which arguably was more important than today's game, I think we can all be pleased that Liverpool came away with the result in this game, because if someone said to you that Liverpool would beat Crystal Palace today, simply get the 3 points, even if it wasn't a good performance, despite the fact that they had to make 5 changes to their lineup and rest a lot of influential players, especially Mohamed Salah. I think we certainly missed him before he came on for the last half hour. Then you probably would have again bitten their hand off, because at this stage of the season, 3 points isn't necessarily such a bad thing. Now, in the grand scheme of things, looking forward to the rest of the season, we don't want to have to be put in this position too many times. We don't want to have to constantly during the season be thinking, well, we've got a European game in midweek, or we've got some FA Cup fixtures clogging up our schedule, so we might want to rest a few of these players, even if we don't want to drop them. We want to be able to have the kind of squad depth and the quality of squad depth that we can call on players to come in, and it won't be to the detriment of how the team actually plays. So I think there is still a fair bit of work to do in the transfer market with regards to that. Today's game was kind of a reflection of how little work Liverpool have done in the transfer market with regards to the players that they were able to bring in when dropping some of the starting 11 players from previous matches. So there is still work to be done, I think, between now and August 31st, despite what Jurgen Klopp says about saying that if the window were to shut now, he would be happy with his squad. I don't really think I would be, and with 12 days left until the window ends, we probably need to start getting a move on with regards to summer transfer business. But for now, at least, having got the 3 points, despite not being in the best position to actually get them, I think we should just savour the moment and be happy that Liverpool won a game. So looking at individual performances in that game, I think Robertson was definitely my man of the match, simply because despite the fact that he was thrown in a little bit earlier than I think Jurgen Klopp would like, he's spoken before about how he's held Robertson back a little bit because he hasn't had too much time in pre-season to adapt to Jurgen Klopp's methods and get his fitness up to speed, because obviously being a fullback in Jurgen Klopp's system is very demanding. And even though Andrew Robertson had a little bit of pre-season at Hull before he came to Liverpool, that probably wouldn't have been enough to actually bring him up to the standards in terms of fitness to be playing for Liverpool. So in an ideal world, I don't think Jurgen Klopp would have played him this early on in the season, but it's kind of sad in a way that we have to rest Alberto Moreno ready for some more important games coming up. But that is the position that Liverpool are in at the moment. We've got a lot of games going on, and we needed to be able to bring Robertson in and give Moreno a little bit of a rest before the game against Hoffenheim. But on the performance that Robertson put in today, I think he's actually put in a decent word for himself to actually start the game against Hoffenheim, because he was very, very impressive. I mean, he's in that kind of Moreno mould of a left-back who likes to get forward an awful lot and likes to actually be involved in the attacking play and even try and get in the box every now and then. But unlike Moreno, he actually had a fair bit of end product to his game. He didn't get an assist in this match at any point, which was kind of disappointing, but I don't think that was necessarily his fault, because he put in some very good crosses. He created some actually clear-cut chances for Joel Matip and Sadio Mane from crosses, and it's just a shame that they didn't really finish them off, and he didn't come away from the game with something a little bit more like an assist. But it was good to see him. He played with a lot of freedom as well. He didn't look like a rabbit in headlights or anything. He simply looked like a left back who was trying to enjoy himself, which is very pleasing to see. And given that he was thrown in a little bit early, and this isn't necessarily the final product with regards to how we can expect Robertson to play even just this season, let alone for the rest of his Liverpool career, then we could have a very hot prospect on our hands in terms of our left back. Defensively as well, he was very sound, and I think overall the whole team was fairly impressive in defence, especially given that Crystal Palace are notoriously a bogey team for us, and they do have Christian Benteke, who is not necessarily the ideal kind of striker for Liverpool to come up against. But it kind of helped that we dropped Dejan Lovren in this game, because while you could argue that it was to save him for the game against Hoffenheim and give him a bit of rest like some of the other players in the squad, Dejan Lovren doesn't have an amazing record against Crystal Palace, I think it's safe to say. And I think Jurgen Klopp was quite worried that maybe he'd get bullied a bit by Christian Benteke, whereas while Ranier Klavan isn't necessarily the best centre-back at the club, when he's come up against physical centre-forwards, he tends to do quite well. I mean, he came up against Ibrahimovic at Old Trafford last season and did fairly well in that game. He came up against Romelu Lukaku against Everton in the Merseyside derby at Goodison Park back in December and played very well then. He basically pocketed Romelu Lukaku. So these are the kind of physical battles, a bit like Martin Skrtel, without really wanting to compare him too much to Martin Skrtel, because he doesn't necessarily have some very good traits when it comes to defending. But like Martin Skrtel, Ranier Klavan seems to kind of relish that defensive battle and a physical battle with a strong centre forward, and it helped him today because not only did he show his strength and keep Benteke quiet, he also won a lot of free kicks out of it as well. So he clearly found a way to get in the referee's good books when coming up against Christian Benteke, and that helps Joel Matip as well, because Joel Matip is a good defender, but coming up against strong centre forwards, kind of like Dejan Lovren, it's not really his thing. So if he has Ranjar Klavan next to him, who's dealing with Christian Benteke at all times, it frees up Joel Matip to deal with any other responsibilities defensively, and he did that very well. Joe Gomez as well, very sound defensively. Would have liked to see a bit more of him going forward, but he's not necessarily a natural right back. He is kind of playing in that role as an auxiliary right back while Liverpool wait for Nathaniel Klein to get back from injury, and obviously while they rest Trent Alexander-Arnold. So all things considered, he did a fairly decent job in that role. In the middle of the park, I think James Milner was Liverpool's standout performer in that game. He wasn't necessarily that amazing, but simply through virtue of the fact that he got on the ball a bit and he looked to do some interesting stuff with it, he's basically put himself several levels above the other players that Liverpool have available in midfield at the moment, because I think midfield has been our key problem so far this season, mainly because we're missing Adam Lallana and Felipe Coutinho at the moment. And Milner, while he didn't live up to the standards that we'd be expecting from Adam Lallana or Phil Coutinho, and he doesn't necessarily play the same roles as them, the fact that he was simply getting on the ball and at least looking to do something interesting with it meant that he was already head and shoulders above the other players, and was actually very helpful in that game. Because the problem with the other midfielders we have at the moment is not just that they aren't doing their job when it comes to attacking or defending really, but they simply seem to be anonymous. You know, they don't really get on the ball that much, and when they do, they don't do anything really interesting with it that actually helps the team out. So the fact that Milner was getting the ball and looking to at least be creative, even though I don't think he really created any chances of note during that game, was positive to see, and hopefully the other midfielders can follow his example. It was also nice to see that he drifted out to the left a lot. I think given his experience playing left back last season, even though he's now playing centre mid, he's sort of drifted into the space between the centre mid and left back spot, and I think part of that was to help Andrew Robertson, because obviously Klopp knows that Robertson is not necessarily 100% ready to be starting for Liverpool in the Premier League. So to have Milner drifting into those positions and just creating a bit of space for Andrew Robertson to express himself a bit more and get in some more crosses, create more chances and attack a little bit more, I think really helped us. And it obviously helped Milner as well that he was going into those positions where Robertson was also creating space for him. And it was notable during the game that a lot of Liverpool's play, when it looked at its most promising, was coming down that left-hand side. So good performance from Jimmy Milner, and hopefully the other midfielders can take a leaf out of his book going into the rest of this month, until at least we get Phil Coutinho and then eventually Adam Lallana back from injury. And obviously we've got to mention Sadio Mane, because at the end of the day, he won the game for Liverpool. He did what he's done an awful lot in the past. He kind of did it against Watford as well, when Liverpool were playing terribly during that first half. They weren't doing anything interesting. They weren't creating any chances. They looked absolutely awful. And then suddenly the ball appears, it pops up for Sadio Mane in the box, and he's able to put away chances with ease. And there's been some debate over whether or not Sadio Mane actually has overtaken Phil Coutinho in terms of being Liverpool's most important player. And while I think over 90 minutes Phil Coutinho is the most important and influential player for us, because especially when he's in that number 8 role over the course of a whole match, he's capable of dictating the attack and dictating the play so well, and basically controlling how well Liverpool perform during a match. But in terms of when we're up against it and we're not necessarily playing well and we just need that one tiny moment of quality to win a match for us, Sadio Mane is the perfect kind of player for Liverpool to call on. He's a bit like Luis Suarez was before the 13-14 season, when Suarez wasn't that great, but neither was the rest of the Liverpool team, and every now and then Suarez would just save us with a goal or two. Sadio Mane is kind of like that, in that when you need him most, when you have to call on him to get Liverpool a goal, by and large, he will tend to do it. And a special mention has to go to Dom Solanke as well, carrying on doing what he's been doing in pre-season before, which is a very important sign for me, because a lot of the time with young players, you'll see moments of quality from them. You'll see moments where you think, God, this player's going to be really good once they start to become a bit more consistent. But Solanke is already past that level, I think, even though he's only at the age of 19 and hasn't actually played that much top-level first-team football yet. He already seems to be the kind of player who knows his strengths and is capable of playing to them. And he is the kind of, he seems to fit the perfect mould for a Jurgen Klopp centre-forward, in that he's got strength, he uses it well, and he uses it to press the ball as well. Unlike Christian Benteke, who was a strong target man kind of player, but wasn't necessarily that active. Dominic Solanke has got those strong attributes. He's capable of being a target man. He's capable of getting in the box and finishing off chances, but he also likes to drop deep, involve himself in the overall play, and harass and press against opposition defenders. And that is exactly what he did today. He harassed the Palace defence, he forced an error, and ultimately it led to the goal. So fantastic from Dom Solanke. Like I said in pre-season, we'd have no problem with him playing maybe the last half hour of a Premier League match, because we know he's good enough to do that now, and he proved that during this game when he came on and he helped make the difference for Liverpool. If I had to pick a player who didn't necessarily impress me that much during that game, because overall Liverpool didn't play that well, and I think certain players were more culpable than others for that fact, I think Jordan Henderson was just very, very disappointing in that match. Because the reason I liked Henderson so much last season was that when he was playing in the number 6 role at the base of the midfield three, he basically dictated the attacking play for the 5 players in front of him and the fullbacks when they got forward as well. Because whenever an attack broke down and the opposition cleared it, or they tried to get the ball forward quickly, Jordan Henderson was always there to intercept the ball, and immediately he'd get things going again. He'd always pick the right pass, start another attack before the opposition could even set themselves and get ready for it. And that was hugely important to Liverpool's attacking play, and really helped us in the way we played at the start of last season when we looked to blitz teams and to wear them out and just completely knacker them and score as many goals as possible. And that's why I was such a huge fan of Jordan Henderson last season. But this season he just doesn't seem to be doing any of those things. I mean, it is a bit of a cliche, I know, when we criticise Jordan Henderson, it's always, you know, he passes back all the time or he passes sideways all the time. But during this game, I think those criticisms were justified, because every time he got on the ball, his passing was too slow. He never made the right decisions as well. He'd get the ball and you think, that's the player you need to pass to. You'd always pick out the player that would be the right pass and would get Liverpool going forward and start creating something interesting in attack. And Jordan Henderson just never got his passing right. He'd always pass it back or sideways and slow things down an awful lot. And in a game like today, that is the exact opposite of what Liverpool needed. They needed someone like Lallana in midfield, or even someone like Naby Keita in midfield. Someone who's got a bit more dynamism and looks to get forward a little bit more. And unfortunately, Jordan Henderson wasn't that. I mean, there's still this idea that he is still recovering from his injury from last season. He hasn't really had too much first team football since then, and it isn't necessarily ideal that with the lack of squad depth that Liverpool have at the moment in midfield, Jordan Henderson has had to start all 3 of the games so far. And if we did have players available for rotation, I don't think he would have done that. I think we would have maybe put Emre Can in the number 6 role every now and then and given Jordan Henderson a bit of a rest to recover from, I think it was a foot injury that he sustained last season. So not necessarily ideal, and there's still hope that the old Jordan Henderson from last season will return and will start becoming beneficial to Liverpool again. But it's a shame to see it for now. Hopefully he can turn it around. So all in all, while it wasn't a great performance from Liverpool at all, we got a result at the end of the day. We got 3 points at the end of the day, and I think really that's all we need. And we're also continuing our recovery from the Watford game that we started against Hoffenheim. Once again, we come out of the game thinking that performance was a little bit better, and we look like we're on the right track. And I think provided we progress through to the Champions League group stages against Hoffenheim and at least put in a decent performance against Arsenal in a week's time, then I think we can safely say that Liverpool will have finally recovered from the game against Watford last week. So that is all for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, why not give it a like? If you're new around here as well, hit that subscribe button and check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days. Apart from that, don't forget to check out some of the content that will be coming out over the next few days with pre-match build-up stuff for the game against Hoffenheim. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter as well, and I'll see you in a bit. Bye for now.